super excited to be here with you all today. It's going to be an amazing time of our heart-to-heart conversation with Alisha. She's here with us today, and we're going to be talking about how the struggle has made her better. What did God do in her struggle, and how has it made her better? You know, we've all just come out of a time of quarantine. So many things have happened, some good and some bad. And we're going to be talking about that and those things and how she navigated through the struggles. And so I'm going to just let Alisha share with us today. I'm going to let her talk about those struggles and how God is using them and how he has used them. So Alisha, why don't you start and share your story with us?
Well, I think it starts several years ago. I've just been in what feels like a constant time of transition, whether it's job transitions or family dynamics changing, the ministries I'm part of changing. Things just never have felt settled. They just keep going one after another. One of the biggest changes being moving here to Georgia in May of 2019. So that was huge. I never expected to leave the state I was in. I really hadn't even left the town I was in yet in my life. So those things are hard.
Yeah.
Hard. But I got here, and that started more transitions. So I used to live on my own and own my own house. Now I'm living with a family, and there's 7 of us in a house.
Wow.
Yeah. A little.
Living alone to living with 7 people.
Yeah. So something to get used to. The job I was in before, I'm working by myself most days. Now I'm in an office with patients that I see face to face every day, all day long. That's a change. Traffic, Metro Atlanta traffic.
Yeah.
I'm used to taking 10 minutes to get everywhere I go. Now I couldn't get anywhere in 10 minutes if I tried.
Now you're surrounded by people in every direction of your life.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
every area.
So just more transitioning.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's unsettling at times. But I just try to push through, knowing that something's next, because there's always something next. But
Tell us about what made it unsettling.
I guess just not feeling secure, like I could rest in any moment. Like everything was always constantly moving and changing, and waiting for that moment where there was just downtime and things didn't change. Just to rest, really. Just to rest.
Yeah. So a lot of the change was draining to you.
Very
it was
much
overwhelming.
So. Very much so. You know, some days are good and you can put on a smile, and other days they're just heavy and hard, and it takes everything in you just to get up and go do what you have to do.
Yeah.
So quarantine time was definitely the same. I ended up getting laid off from my job at the end of March, which kind of gave me that break for a minute, or at least it felt like it to start with. But it only took a few days for that to not feel so much of a gift as it did a curse to be sitting at home alone in a house full of 7 people, but alone in my room by myself doing the same thing day after day with nothing to do. I had gotten used to all the doing and the transition of everything one after another, that I really did not know how to sit still at all. And having the people around me but still feeling alone had its own levels of depression to come with it, knowing that they still had work to do, they still had school to do, they were still hustling and bustling, and I was just standing still. So it was a struggle. It was lonely, for sure.
Yeah. So you had the transition into a busy season, into the busiest season you've ever experienced in your life, with all of the stuff you're doing. And then now you're doing nothing. you have no work to do, and you're watching everybody else do all of the things that they're supposed to be doing while you're wondering, what in the world am I supposed to be doing?
Exactly.
And why did God bring me here if I'm just going to do nothing?
It's true. It was actually really hard not to think I should go back.
Yeah.
I didn't have a job. My unemployment, I wasn't sure I was going to get it because I hadn't lived here very long. So I didn't qualify financially to make it. I filed my paperwork and they told me I didn't make enough, and I filed an appeal to try to get that, but I really didn't know financially what was going to happen. And there was a whole household relying on my portion of rent too. So it wasn't just me. But in all that, the thought certainly crossed my mind multiple times. I could just always go back. But I wrestled with it for sure. But I knew that God had called me here. He had opened doors for me here. He'd made a way for me to be here at that time and at this moment. So if I went back, was that really an option?
Yeah.
If God had made a way, was it really an option?
So in all of this loneliness, in all of this uncertainty, in all of this, what's next, God? And what am I even doing? Where was God in this for you?
I would say he was always going before me. And that's kind of my relationship with him has always been that way. He sets me up beforehand. I don't always know it, obviously, till I'm in the moment and I need it. But for months and weeks before, he'd been speaking promises. That was the word he gave me for the year, for 2020, was promise. She considered him faithful who had made the promise. And I just kept going back to that word of promise. And if he made the promises, he keeps the promises. And I had to remind myself of all the promises he's kept already. The fact that I was here in this time was a promise fulfilled. And he's always made a way, and I've never gone without. Not when I left a job in the corporate world to do ministry at a quarter of the pay. All my bills were always paid. I always had a roof over my head. I always had food. He's never once failed in that area, so I just had to go back and remind myself the places he's been before and how faithful he's been before. And it just got me through one day at a time.
One day at a time.
One day at a time.
So if you could tell somebody right now who is in a season of loneliness what it is that you did, some practical and spiritual tools to get you through the season that you were in, what would you want them to know?
I think the biggest thing I did was just reflect. I keep a journal. Generally, I'm not always consistent with it, but I went back and I read through the notes I'd made, and things that I didn't realize at the time were applying exactly to those moments that I was going through now. So just taking the time to see what he's said before, what he's done before, and making sure to not stay in the isolation.
That's good.
As alone as I felt. I did have my sisters and my family at my house, and some days I didn't want to talk to them about how I was feeling because I knew they had their own things going on. But when it came down to it, I knew that they needed someone too, and that they had my best interest in mind. So I could just open up and let them know how I was feeling, and then they always had that chance to lean on me too. So making sure you don't stay isolated and you talk to your sisters and let them speak into you.
So important. So important. We cannot stay isolated because your faith encourages my faith, and we grow together and we become stronger together by what God's doing in your life and the victories that you're experiencing, and even in the pain that you're experiencing. We grow together, and we're there for one another. Two is better than one. God has done so much through you and in you during this time of quarantine. He has been a promise keeper. I want to hear about the amazing things, and there's so many that we could talk about today, but I want to hear about just one thing that God has done in your life through this struggle, because he has been so faithful.
He has. In a time where a lot of people are looking at 2020 and the situation we've been in and thinking about how much they've lost, I'm quite the opposite. I really feel like I've come out much more blessed than I went in. The jobs I was in got me lined up for what I'm in now. I actually made some extra connections in the previous job that allowed me to have the open doors in the job I'm in now, with SatisFeed. I was able to volunteer because I had the time on my hands, so I was able to get in and
So what
help.
looked like a negative situation, because you had been fired from your job, you had been laid off, and God gave you time and an opportunity to volunteer somewhere, that now you're working at this place.
Yep.
And he's opened this door. In the middle of uncertainty, God was leading you and he was guiding you, even though you had no idea. All you could do was trust him.
It's exactly true. And God loves me in an extra special way sometimes, where he made a lot of this happen on the anniversary of the day I moved here.
Wow.
So the day I sat and had the conversation about coming on board was 1 year to the day that I moved here. I had a couple of other conversations that day that were financial blessings.
Yeah.
But they were supposed to happen a couple days later or a couple days before, and they just all lined up on that day.
Yeah.
And it's just, to me, that extra God smile that says, I see you, I know this day's important, and I'm still here doing all of this and working. But it's been a blessing for sure. And even from that time on, that job's even grown from what it was in that moment. It's become more as the need's grown. So is my position and the time there.
Amen.
And then a couple months down the road, an opportunity here at Life Church to help do some accounting, which is, my forte. So I'm here on staff too. So doing ministry again, which was something that he promised me.
That's in your
and
heart.
has been there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. And you said something 2 times that I want to point out really quick as we come to an end. You said, he's been there. That's what I want you to know. I want you to know that when it looks like a mess, and it looks ugly, and it looks uncertain, God is there. He's always been there, and he always will be. He will never leave us, and he will never forsake us. And while we may not be able to see what our next step is, while we may not be able to see where God is leading us, he is there, and he is leading. The Bible tells us that he orders the steps of the righteous. And I know that 2020 for many of us looks like it's been canceled, and looks like it's been falling apart, and looks like let's just skip it all together. But God hasn't left 2020. God hasn't canceled it. Just like Alisha and God going before her and working on her behalf and ordering her steps, he is ordering ours too. And he has a beautiful plan filled with his abundant grace for us all to walk in. I love that you talked about reflecting, taking time to journal and reflect on all that God has done, because in those times when we're struggling, we have to look back to the faithfulness of God and remind ourselves that He's never left us. In the most difficult seasons, He's working for us. In the book of James, it talks about those struggles that we go through and how God is shining His glory through our struggles. And as I sit here with you today, I see God in you through your struggles. Amen. And it's a beautiful picture. Amen. It's so beautiful. So I want to say thank you. Thank you for letting His light and His glory shine through your story today.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you for being willing to bring hope and encouragement to those who might be in the middle of something and they don't see a way out. It's been such a blessing today. I hope that you are as encouraged as I am and as Alisha is in the faithfulness of God. I love you. God bless you.